Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Masters of Cinema Marathon, and in this video I will of course be talking about Spy Number 5 in the Masters of Cinema collection from Eureka, and it is a documentary by Al Reinert for all mankind. And I have a lot to say about this film. Holy moly. I watched this a couple of years ago when I first bought this disc, and it blew me away. In fact, it very much reminds me of the time period in which me and Connie were watching a lot of space-related stuff. It was, I think, 2014 when me and Connie had this late-night discussion about space and the universe. And I actually have about an hour of audio recorded of us just having a conversation, not for a video or anything. I wonder where that if that even exists still somewhere on my computer. And I was explaining to Connie how big the universe is. She'd never really thought about it. She'd never really grasped the scope of the universe, right? And it moved her to tears. Like, she couldn't really believe it. And she became obsessed. I mean, I considered myself kind of a space enthusiast as a kid. I loved it. It was my favorite subject in school. I did like a little project on it and all that kind of stuff. And then here she was, kind of within a couple of months, knowing so much more than I had ever known in my entire life, being an ardent kind of fan of the universe and all that kind of science and everything. And so she just became obsessed. And so this was a film where I was like, hey, do you want to see this? Yes, it's space. Put it on. And we watched it and we were floored by this film. It is an hour and 20 minutes, and it is an archival documentary that is pieced together, stitched together, through all of the NASA archival footage that was filmed, recorded, and preserved across each of the moon landing missions in the 60s and 70s. There is no narration in the film. There is nothing really explaining to you what's going on here. There's a few brief title cards at the beginning and end of the film, but apart from that, it just shows you these moon landing missions, the Apollo missions. And the only thing that we hear are these selected interviews that were conducted by Al Reinert with the astronauts who went to the moon. So we just get these snippets, these sound bites, and it's not really talking about the technical aspects of, it is in some ways, but a lot of it is more about the feeling of how it was to go to the moon. And that to me is far more interesting, because you're not going to sit there in an hour and 20 minutes and fully grasp all of the scientific properties of everything that went on during those missions. You just know it's very complicated, and it took a very long time for them to be able to even do that kind of stuff. Back then the technology of computers was primitive compared to what we have now. I think they say that iPhones, have more power and processing capabilities than the computers, the supercomputers they were using back in the 60s to get them to the moon and do all the communication from ground control, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how true that really is. It might just be one of those things that gets passed around. It doesn't have much water to it, but regardless, that the technology was nowhere near as advanced as it is today, and it's such a mind-boggling thing that they were even able to do it. And so the film does touch on that a little bit, and I love how it kind of cuts back and forth from the kind of the shots in space and on the moon to mission control, but you're really more about the feeling of going to the moon, to kind of going into space, leaving the Earth's atmosphere, putting your foot on an alien planet. It's something so unimaginable. And I think the fact that they went to the moon in the 60s and 70s and then they never went back, and no one ever did it again, makes it so much more elusive and mysterious, in fact. And Al Reinert, the director, he was a journalist and would go to NASA often and meet with the film editor at NASA and see all these incredible images that had not really been released to the public. And for him, his kind of mindset behind making this film was, back when this actually happened, when it was shown live on TV, all people really saw was that, you know, that shot of Neil Armstrong. I mean, they saw like the whole kind of, there was lots of stuff shown on TV, but it was all on a small TV set. He felt like it was a crime that all this amazing footage was sat in a vault and was not really seen by the masses on a big screen in the best possible quality, you know, to kind of have all that kind of grandeur and majestic scope of something so incredible kind of boxed into a small TV set in black and white. To him just seemed, again, like a crime, like a travesty. So he wanted to put this film together to get all of that footage that was never really used or shown on television or anywhere in the world, and to put it into a movie. And another masterstroke, I think, of this film is that it doesn't just follow, you know, the first Apollo mission that went to the moon and set down on the moon. It follows all of the Apollo missions. But it doesn't differentiate. And even to the astronauts, it's not like, hey, this is Neil Armstrong. Hey, this is Buzz Aldrin. Hey, this is Alan Bean. It just says, you know, did you just hear the voices? And you just see the Earth as they're leaving its atmosphere. You see the moon as they're approaching it, as it's kind of rolling over. I mean, it's just amazing stuff. And so in that sense, you don't really get a personal feeling for any of the astronauts, but it's more about this collective achievement of these American astronauts. And you can look at that in the film and say, well, you know, it's an American propaganda, you know, the reasons were so political, planting the American flag and all this. And to a degree, there is truth to that, but take all kind of, you know, political aspects out of this, take the Americana out of this. It's really just about mankind, the human race as a species, yearning for discovery and exploration and going out of our planet to another, you know, planetary body. I mean, we call it the moon. It's not a technical planet, but it's an alien world, you know. Even if no alien lives on it, it's stepping foot onto something that has never been stepped foot on before. And there's something just like, I almost get goosebumps thinking about it. And I'm not going to go into in this video the whole, you know, oh, the moon landings were faked, don't you know? You know, I'll say there's one shot in the film where they're putting the flag down, and obviously the flag had metallic rods on the inside to kind of keep it, you know, to make it kind of be flat and smooth, because obviously there's just a vacuum on the moon. There's no kind of, there's nothing that would keep it up. It would just fall down. So they had little rods inside. But in the footage that's shown in this film, the flag appears to be waving in the bottom half, like there's a breeze, and I just don't know how to explain that. You know, there must be an explanation, and you know, again, you could look, oh well, that's proof right there. There's, you know, the Stanley Kubrick directed it, you know. But for me, if they spent all that money faking all of that stuff, there is no chance in hell that they're going to film one shot of the flag being put in, and there's a breeze in the studio and they decide to keep the footage. It's just never going to happen, you know. There's far more reasons to not to believe that that is not faked than there is to believe that it is faked in terms of that one shot of the flag. Just thinking kind of, you know, kind of broad strokes here of the entire thing being a hoax. But I said when I first saw this that for anyone who feels like the moon landings were faked, watch this film. You know, I've been watching movies my whole life. I've been watching, you know, lots of different formats, you know, the VHS era, the DVD era, the Blu-ray era, and getting to see films that were shot on film and getting to see films that were shot digitally, and I can tell the difference. There's something about the specific grain structure that, you know, even to the naked eye, to me, I'm able to discern, well, that was shot on film, surely, right? And there is a lot of footage of this that was shot on video when they got to the moon's surface, because they were trying to conserve as much film as possible. And they talk about how, you know, they were so kind of concerned about running out of film, they would even start, you know, filming and cranking it at a lower frame rate so that they could kind of get as much as possible. But ultimately they ended up kind of wasting some of that. And the NASA film editor in the documentary on the Blu-ray actually says that sometimes they would just record these really short clips that were just unusable because they were so short, and he would have rather than recorded something a little lengthier that might not be as good, but at least would be usable, you know. So a lot of stuff they filmed on video as well on the lunar surface, and you can instantly tell that it's shot on video. But then you have this amazing cleaned up footage from like 16mm, 35mm cameras that just look incredible. Like some of the shots of them flying across the moon and just seeing it kind of rolling around is just breathtaking stuff. It's spine tingling footage. It is probably the most incredible footage I've ever seen, recorded by a camera. And I can only imagine what would happen if we went to the moon now with all the HD cameras, the amount of footage they could get that would be amazing. I mean, you look at the stuff that they do now in these nature documentaries like Blue Planet and so on, just some of the most stunning things you will ever see. Imagine that extrapolated to the realm of actually landing on the moon again. That would be incredible. Or if they ever get to Mars, So, just the footage alone is unbelievable. Having it collected in this 18 minutes is unbelievable. But on top of that, we have the recollections of the astronauts talking about what it felt like to be there, to stand on that rock and to look out into the blackness and the kind of the infinite darkness of space, and to see what they described as this blue marble of the Earth on the horizon. It's just amazing. It really, really is. And I can't think of anything else to really inspire you more to kind of, that kind of whole follow your dreams thing. To these men who got to go out there and do it. And it seems like as simple as sitting in a rocket and getting blasted up into space and hoping you don't die. But these guys were constantly working. They had so much to do. And it's great to kind of see everything they did kind of honored in this time capsule in a way. And I think that it is genuinely one of the best documentaries ever made, one of the most important documentaries ever made. I think there should be required viewing for every single human on the face of the planet. I know that sounds like I'm giving this an over-the-top kind of, just lavishing praise on it, but I really think that it's one of the coolest things we've ever done. And this film is emblematic of that and just showcases that in a brilliant way. And just to put the cherry on the top, we have the score from Brian Eno, who just delivers some amazing otherworldly music that is haunting at times, but also majestic, and really makes the film soar in the appropriate moments and really makes you reflect on what this thing was. And incredible film, absolutely incredible, and I could just keep talking about it over and over and over again. But just again, the footage when they get to the moon's surface and driving around in the buggy and kind of hopping around in zero gravity, and there's like almost like a fails section where we just see like all the clips of them falling over, and they talk about how we're running around and falling over. If we torn our suits on a rock, we'd be done. Like it was really dangerous stuff. And just like the whole fact of whether they could have got home again, and then the Apollo 13 mission, which is briefly touched on. We get some footage. If you've seen the film Apollo 13, you'll know kind of the little thing that they were kind of building inside the shuttle, where Mission Control right, what do they have in that shuttle that we can use to help them? And you see footage of them in Mission Control putting that thing together, and then back on the ship you see them kind of getting all the material. So there's some stuff from Apollo 13. In fact, Al Reinert went on to co-write, I believe, Apollo 13, the movie, directed by Ron Howard, which is another fantastic film. But this is the real deal, damn it. This is the actual stuff. Now, there is one faked shot in the movie, which I wouldn't have thought they would have done. And he explains in the commentary, Al Reinert, why he decided to fake it. And it's a shot of them in the rocket before it's about to take off, looking through the kind of porthole out to the kind of the blue sky in the middle of the day. And you see the moon kind of looming large, and it's kind of a it's a visual look at where they're going, where this adventure is pointed at, basically. And I totally understand why he'd want to do that. In fact, he also used footage from Gemini missions. There's a spacewalk sequence that isn't from the Apollo missions, but he kind of stitched it into a place where it felt like it was part of the whole ride, basically. And I feel like doing that it really does help. And I think that even though he's stretching things and making the astronauts kind of more of a collective than personal, just adds to the overall kind of package, I think. And they were kind of worried when they screened the film, like, oh, maybe the astronauts are going to be pissed off when they see this, because it's not like, this is Buzz Aldrin, this is Neil Armstrong. But they didn't. They let their egos kind of, sit back a little bit and just appreciated the overall, grandeur of this film that really is about celebrating the collective more than, it's not like a Neil Armstrong, centric piece. It's not an Apollo 11 centric piece. You get the whole, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. You get that stuff, but you get also the things people don't talk about, the footage people don't see, the footage that people haven't, been subjected to time and time again. I say subjected to like it's a bad thing, but stunning film, and really shows you how in the beginning of the Masters of Cinema collection, at least the Blu-ray collection, whenever I talk about the Masters of Cinema collection, I'm talking about the Blu-ray collection, because I've never collected the DVD collection. So, I mean, it just shows you the range. Spy Number 1, an American silent film made by a German director, and then we jump to, a Japanese modern drama, then we jump to a film from Hong Kong, also modern, then we go to a 60s Jean-Luc Godard movie, and then we have one of the great documentaries of our time. And then moving on from this one, we have French animation from the 70s, psychedelic. So there's a great kind of just jumping all over the place, which is just fantastic. But this was also released by the Criterion Collection, I believe around the same time, and it ports over pretty much all of the extras. There's only one extra the Criterion Blu-ray has that this Blu-ray doesn't have, and it's a selection of interviews conducted for other space documentaries, I think, with the astronauts who landed on the moon, and they're kind of talking heads, which is something that this film doesn't have. So it kind of gives you that option to see some of that stuff, I suppose. So I've talked about the movie. I'm now going to talk about special features, because I did say to myself, and in the reintroduction, that I wasn't going to go all out now that I'm doing this thing again and watch all the extras and read everything in the booklet, but yeah, I kind of had to with this one, actually. So one thing I love about the package of this is actually that the discs, that both the Blu-ray and the DVD, have the moon on them, which is just a really nice kind of, it's a small detail, but it's a detail I really like. We have the booklet there. And kind of following on from the talk of the Une Femme Marie booklet, which was 80 pages long, and just, I mean, the text was so small. I mean, it was just packed to the gills with this stuff, and unfortunately it was stuff that I didn't get much from. This is, I don't know how many pages this booklet is. I can find out right now. 27 pages, so it's more than half shorter, if that even makes sense. And, we have some nice images in this booklet, which is nice to see. But also the text is actually a lot larger. I mean, look at this. The text is huge. So I feel like if the text in this booklet was as small and fine a detail as the Une Femme Marie release, this would be probably like 8 pages long. But it was really interesting, and it spoke to me on a human level about things, and it talks about the transfer of the film, about the audio, so it gives you kind of the technical details and things like that. We have the John F. Kennedy speech reprinted here. We have Al Reinert talking about the film and his process of putting it together, and also his recollections of kind of watching the moon landing and kind of giving a perspective of where he was in his life when it actually happened, and he saw it unfold in real time. And I think there's something else in here that I found really interesting. It was a little bit from Brian Eno, who talks about his score and doing the music for the film. And yeah, so it's just one of those really nice little booklets that gives you some nice perspective. Doesn't go into too much detail, but it's just a really nice companion piece to the whole thing. Then we have the actual extras on disc, the audio commentary, which includes the director Al Reinert and also Eugene A. Cernan or Cernan, I'm not too sure, but Eugene was the last man to walk on the moon. I was going to revisit this film for this video to kind of talk about the film, because I thought it was a great film and I was really geared up to watch it again. But I watched it with the commentary this time, and I felt like maybe I'd rewatch the film on its own as well, but I didn't feel the need to, because the commentary to me is almost like an alternate version of the movie. I guess technically any audio commentary is giving you an alternate version of the movie, but considering the fact that we have an astronaut who walked on the moon doing the majority of the commentary on this, and seen as the actual movie itself is all this footage with commentary laid over it, it really felt like a second version of the film, and a delightful second version of the film. Al Reinert kind of oversees the commentary and talks about certain details of how he was involved in making the film, but for the most part, Eugene takes kind of front center stage and talks about his experiences. Talks about some of the footage that's happening on screen, and who's that and who's this, but also just talking about all the little details, and more importantly, what it felt like. And I think at one point he says in the commentary, I feel like anyone who could step foot on the moon after a certain period would become a poet, because it's such an experience, that you can't help but put into words how incredible it is, and how it completely changes your perspective on everything. And it's a fantastic commentary. I highly recommend it if you've seen the film but haven't listened to it for whatever reason. and I got so much out of it. So that was great. And I also went back and flicked through the movie to see certain pieces with the music and to kind of absorb some of the more breathtaking sequences with, again, the incredible score that Brian Eno put together. And there's a few other songs here and there and stuff, but it's mainly that score. But also there's moments where there's no sound, you know, like when the rocket's taking off, you're just hearing the rumbling and the fire of the engine, and just the incredible slow motion shot of that rocket taking off and the ice falling off of it, and the kind of just the camera underneath, yeah, where the rocket is firing off, and just all this. I mean, it's amazing. Just some of the most amazing stuff you'll ever see, I think. That's just me in this film. So the audio commentary was fantastic. Then we have An Accidental Gift, the making of For All Mankind. This was produced in 2009 for the Criterion Collection, and I believe this Blu-ray also came out in 2011. Oh, actually, I think this was the reprint, because originally the first few Masters of Cinema titles were released in the blue case. So I think this is the reprinting. Regardless, it was the 20th anniversary of the film, and Criterion came out with their Blu-ray, and I think that Eureka followed soon after because they port over most of the extras. But the documentary is really interesting, and it goes more into the kind of details of making the documentary that the commentary doesn't touch on, because Eugene is kind of overtaking things, which for me was fine. So Al Reinert talks about discovering the footage, meeting the film editor at NASA, and we actually he goes back to the NASA archives and goes to the cold storage room where they have all those original film prints and canisters. Really, really cool stuff, and just talking about the process of putting the film together and having it released and so on and so forth. It's a really nice 30-minute documentary on the making of this documentary. Then we have a NASA sound archive, which basically is about 20 short audio clips, about 6 minutes in length when you play all of them. So if you want to hear like the original, One Small Step for Man, One Giant Leap for Mankind, Houston, We Have a Problem, they're all there. All the greatest hits are accounted for. But you also have the more kind of less talked about audio clips and what's the word? Bite-sized? Bite-sized clip. There's a word for sound bites. There we go. I'll leave that one in for free. The sound bites of, the astronauts as they're landing on the moon or leaving the moon, and you have Eugene's final words, actually, the last man who walked on the moon, as he's about to leave. So that's a really interesting kind of just one of those kind of oddities that I'm really glad that they included on the Blu-ray. There's a number of liftoff footage clips of various missions, which is about 2 minutes long. Some interesting stuff. And then finally we have a gallery of Alan Bean's artwork. Alan Bean was one of the astronauts who stepped foot on the moon. I think he was in the second crew, perhaps. Don't quote me on that. Who went to the moon and landed. So he's one of the select few who actually walked around on the surface of the moon. And when he came back, many years later, he actually decided to paint astronauts on the moon, moon kind of landscapes and so on, because he would then be the only person, the only artist who could paint the moon who'd actually been there. And so he would take famous photographs from the moon and kind of do his own kind of artist rendition of it, but also things that he kind of cooked up in his own head. And the special feature here is a 45-minute featurette. It's about 9 minutes of him kind of talking about how he got around to doing these paintings, and we see him in his workshop, and he goes into how he makes the paintings personal, where he will actually texturize these paints with like a boot from his suit, or just like a little hammer that he brought back from the moon. So there's literally imprints and textures on those paintings, on some of them, of kind of items that he brought from the moon. He also has taken down dust from his suit and kind of puts it into the painting, so that they really are a piece of the moon in some way. Now, I will say, seeing all of his paintings, because there's then like a lengthy 35, I think, minutes section where it's just his paintings and his commentary talking about each piece, which for me is one of the more kind of niche extras that I think most people would probably kind of skip, but I found it really interesting and I really enjoyed it. Some great pieces of art, but also him talking about them. And sometimes he's like, he's just explaining what you're seeing in the painting, but other times he kind of gives a good story behind them. Perhaps my favorite was one which shows two astronauts, I believe. I think it was actually him and the guy he was on the moon with, and this big boulder, and his partner was, I think, collecting some dust with his hand from the boulder to kind of sample and take back to their ship. And afterwards he confessed, oh, I wish that I had written my daughter's name, Tracy, on that boulder. You know, that would have been really cool. And so what he did was he drew the boulder and painted it, and painted in the name Tracy. But not just, you know, randomly painting it in. He actually got that guy to write out how he would do it in his handwriting, and he copied that exactly. And it's just a really sweet little moment to kind of say, you know, he kind of jokes that he didn't have to go all the way back to the moon to do it. I could just do it for him in this painting. So I thought that was a really sweet, an interesting extra. That again, it's a bit of a niche thing, but I thought it was really cool. And I will say I prefer his earlier paintings from the 80s, which didn't have the textures on it, because while it's cool to see all like the boot prints over the paintings, it kind of gets a little messy for me. I appreciate the artistic intention, but his paintings are so beautiful, you know, that I really love the cleaner ones from the 80s, because every painting, it tells you the name of the painting and the year that he painted it in. So I think that about rounds off my thoughts on For All Mankind. I could probably ramble on about it for another 10 minutes or so, but I will leave it there because I feel like I've adequately expressed how much I love this film and how much I love this release. I mean, the extras are fantastic. I'm glad to have finally got round to them. You know, I had every intention of watching them all when I first watched the film, and I was so psyched up about it, but hey, it is what it is, and good things come to those who wait a few years before they get around to them. So For All Mankind gets a double thumbs up for me. One of the best titles in the collection that I've seen so far. Of course, things could change, you know. Who knows, over the next kind of 100 videos I might find 100 titles that are far better than this, but somehow I doubt that. I think this is a really special film, and it just shows you, it encapsulates just that incredible human spirit that was instrumental in getting this thing off the ground, literally. The space program, the Apollo missions, you know, all the people who, you know, people who lost their lives in the process of trying to get people on the moon. You know, the failed missions, the failed experiments, and you know, years and years of training and just, you know, failures and successes. And even in the Apollo missions, where they would go to the moon but they wouldn't land because they didn't have enough fuel, or Apollo 13, where you all know the story, or you should know the story. If you don't, go check out the film Apollo 13. It's fantastic and tells you the story at the same time. So there we go. For All Mankind, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time in episode 6 for the animated film Fantastic Planet. Until then, thank you for watching. Leave your thoughts on the film down below, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.